Hey guys, it's Sarah from Just My Typewriter, and I have finally fixed the last broken typewriter in my collection. So earlier in the year, I guess it was last year, what year am I in? In 2022, I did a video update at the end of the year, and I said that I had about 29 typewriters. I sold one after that, so I have 28 typewriters, and one of them was broken. But only one, and that one was a Remington Deluxe model from about 1948. I purchased it in January of 2021, brought it home to quickly clean it to see if I could get it working, and then I promptly sat it under the repair table and never went back to it because I couldn't figure it out. Then I moved again and brought it here with me to my new apartment, and I attempted to kind of test what was wrong with it in November when I was doing my 30 typewriters for 30 days challenge. I was typing on it and the keys move fine. The carriage does move when you use the return lever on either side, but it just doesn't move while typing. It wasn't the margins because I checked those. It wasn't a carriage lock because I checked that. And I knew that the spring and the drawband were fine because I could still move the carriage around using the two levers on the side. So I didn't really know what was wrong with it. So I brought it home to my mechanic to see if he could figure out what was wrong with this machine. As he was doing a simple quick look over on this typewriter, he also couldn't figure it out because nothing looked bent, nothing looked broken, and there wasn't anything that we could tell was missing. So he told me to take off all the panels and try cleaning it again. Now, when I first got this machine in 2021, I didn't have a ton of experience removing the external panels from a machine. I hadn't really done that a lot yet, but over the next 2 years in that process, I had taken off a lot of panels. I had taken apart Smith Corona machines, I had taken apart an Adler, I've taken apart other machines, and I just was really comfortable then after a while figuring out how the panels go on the outside of a machine, taking them apart and putting them back on. So I started the process of disassembling the outside of this Remington typewriter. Now, the outside is pretty similar to a Smith Corona as far as taking off the outside panels. You do have to remove the top plate portion bulbous shape at the top. That comes with 4 screws, 2 in the front, 2 on the back. And then you can take off the outside skirting panel. That also has about 4 screws, 2 are under that top panel, which is why you have to remove it first. And then you can take off the back plate with, again, 4 screws. Where I ran into trouble was removing the platen and the paper tray. Now, when I started to take apart machines, I started with 1950s Royal body machines, little portables like the Quiet Deluxe, the Aero, the Champion, the Aristocrat, my least favorite of typewriters. But when you take out a platen on those machines, you've got about 4 screws you have to remove. You remove your 2 platen knobs and you can take out the center pole and then lift out your platen. Smith Coronas from about the 1950s on have easy removable platens, which usually only have a screw or 2 in them, and you can really easily lift out the entire platen. I much prefer that design. But when I ran into this Remington I got stuck because there was only 1 screw and then everything else was stuck. I didn't really understand it. What I had to do was then Google it, and thank goodness for YouTube and other collectors. I had to watch a YouTube tutorial for how to remove this platen. And what I learned was you actually have to remove the platen on the left side of the typewriter first. There is a nut inside the platen knob that you have to loosen, and I used pliers, and then you have to spin that knob away from you to unscrew it from the inside center pole on the inside of your platen. Then you can remove your set screw on the other side, remove that platen knob, take out that center pole, and then lift out your platen. But I wouldn't have figured that out without the internet. Then I ran into the paper tray. And typically paper trays are held in with 2 screws. Sometimes you get a bottom panel that's separate from the top backing panel that has the branding across the top. Pretty easy to remove, you just remove those 2 screws and out it pops. Some of the machines from the Smith Corona line that I've worked on before that are a little bit later or in that lightweight portable style have a different mechanism on the back of their paper trays. They have this really heavy duty spring that's held in place with this scary arm, and you have to bend this scary arm to get the paper tray out. They're nightmares. I hate them. Those are on the Skyriders and the Corsairs, but I couldn't figure out how this paper tray came out of there because there wasn't any spring on the back of it, there weren't any screws in it, and I didn't understand how it was in there in the first place. Thank goodness, again, for YouTube, and I will list all those tutorials that I used down below. But I found this video of someone working on a Remington from the 1940s, different finish than mine, but they showed me that there are these 2 pins that hold the paper tray in the front, and they're on the front of the carriage. And you have to remove those pins to lift out the paper tray. Genius. I don't know why I didn't think of that, probably because I don't know what I'm doing. So I had to find a way to remove these pins that were holding in the paper tray. Eventually, I just started shoving a paper clip in there and using needle nose pliers to then remove the pins and take out the paper tray. And with that, the outside of the machine was disassembled. And we still didn't know what was wrong with it. So I started to do my cleaning process again, but it was a lot easier to get to the internal pieces because all of that paneling was removed. So now I could really get in there with my mineral spirits and toothbrush and clean out all of those portions, including the rails and the escapement of the machine. Once I cleaned that and brought it back inside and heated it up with a hairdryer because it was below freezing outside and very warm inside and we didn't want condensation and cause rust, I was able to get the machine working. Like, it started to move. And it was like magic, and I don't really know what happened. And I put all the panels back on, and it stopped working again. I thought maybe something was rubbing in a wrong place, or there was too much tension in some place. But what we actually determined was that the escapement was still too gunked up. So we had to go back in with brake cleaning fluid into the escapement area, and then air compress that out, and it started working, and it was so easy, and I'm almost frustrated that it was so easy because I waited for 2 years to fix it. What we determined is someone went in there, and when it stopped working, they sprayed it down in WD-40, which can be bad because over time WD-40 or any oil is going to collect a lot of dust and gunk over time and gum up those moving pieces inside your typewriter. You shouldn't have to add a ton of lubricants inside your typewriter to get it working. It's designed to operate without that. And when people add in all those oils over time, it collects dust, it makes it harder for those pieces to move. So there just was some gunk in the escapement of this machine, which was causing the paws not to work properly on the bottom of the typewriter. So with brake cleaning fluid and mineral spirits, we were able to get this machine working and back into operating condition. I then brought it back here and started my external cleaning process. Now, because this machine is shiny and not like a crinkle paint or a matte finish, I did want to use the cleaner that I use on shiny surfaced machines. Try saying that 5 times fast. I used car wax in this case on the outside of this paneling machine. So I took all the panels off again, and I would take a damp cloth, wipe the panel down, spray some car wax on it, and then buff that out with a dry cloth. Now this just shined up the surface. It removed any excess dirt or dust or oils from my hands on the outside of the machine. I then used a different cleaner on the keys. Typically I use Simple Green, but I've been asked to try some new cleaners, so I tried Method Cleaner on the keys. I'm still testing this cleaner. I'm not sure about it yet, but I did spray that on there, let that sit, and then wipe that off, and that seemed to do the trick. I then went in with Simple Green after the fact though, because it's just a little bit stronger, just to make sure that I got off all the stuff on the keys. I put all the panels back on and then did a type test. Now, when I get a new machine and I start to put it back together or get it working, I do like to figure out a little bit more about the model itself. I like typewriters for their historical value. I think they're interesting, and I don't have a ton of Remingtons. So I started to try to figure out what kind of machine this was. There's no labeling for a model type on this machine. It just says Remington Rand on the back panel. So I went into the typewriter database and started looking at other people's postings of Remingtons from about the 1940s and 50s. And what I found was on the typewriter database, there are like 3 separate categories under Remington Rand that all have machines that look like mine. There's the Remington Rand Deluxe, there's Remington Rand D space Lux, and there's the Remington Rand Deluxe Model 5. And under all of those postings are machines that look like mine. So I went and did a little bit more digging to try to figure out exactly what model type this was, and I found some vintage advertisements that had machines that looked like mine. Mine has little round keys with no rings on them, little black plastic keys, but I've seen some other Remington Rands that have a similar finish to my machine, but they have these bulky keycaps to them with a white row across the top. And mine just doesn't look like that, so I had trouble figuring out a date. But I did find some advertisements from about 1948 that had machines that looked just like mine. So I'm determining that this machine is from about 1948 because then I found a 1949 ad that had those different key-shaped tops across the top of the keyboard, so I'm guessing it's 1948. What's also interesting is in these ads from about 1948 is that the machine is really marketed heavily to a student audience, so that you'd be better at doing your homework. So the parents would buy you this typewriter for Christmas and you'd just get better grades. And one of the ads actually references this in their materials. It reads, well, what's more, nationwide tests by eminent educators and psychologists prove that students who use typewriters get substantially higher grades in all of their subjects. Language usage averaged 38% better, spelling 23% better, reading 9% better, and arithmetic computation 31% better, to name a few. Now, I used a typewriter and I was not any better at reading that advertisement, was I? Another ad also referenced that the ringless keycaps were better for people with longer nails because your nails wouldn't get caught between the plastic key and the ring cap, which I think is interesting. There's been a couple times where nail care and nail polish have coincided with typewriter usage, and I've talked about that a lot, and I know you're not interested, but I did find that interesting as well, that they again reference nails when using a typewriter keyboard in some of these ads. On the bottom of this machine, there are also a few dates written in pencil. So there's one from 1949, there's one from 1954, and then I added mine from 2023. I don't know if these are sale dates or dates when someone went in and fixed them or repaired them, but I thought it was really cool to see something handwritten on the inside of this machine, and I had to add my own mark, obviously. There's some things on this machine that I really enjoy compared to other machines in my collection. I don't have a ton of Remingtons. I've had a Quiet Ritter, which I sold. I have a Travel Ritter, which I love. It's nice and small, very snappy, but it's only one color, and I don't like the carriage lock across the front. This one is a little bit different than both of those. Again, the finish is shiny. It looks different, but there's some things on it that I just really think are well thought out. On the right side of the carriage, you have your lever, which releases your carriage to go back and forth without using your carriage return lever. On the left side, this pulls forward. So you pull this lever forward to move your carriage around. The lever next to it lowers or raises your rollers underneath so you can get different paper types through. And this pushes backwards. So if you were trying to push back your rollers and lower them a little bit, you're not accidentally going to hit your carriage release lever because they go in different directions. And I think that's really nice because they don't pull in the same way. This way you're not going to accidentally bump something when you're trying to do something else and mess everything up. There's also a carriage lock on this machine. I don't like the carriage lock on my Travel Writer because I always forget where it is and how it works. It's a lever across the front, and normally when I see that lever across the front, I think it's for reversing ribbon direction. On the Travel Writer, it is a carriage lock. On this machine, the carriage lock is actually under the carriage return lever on the right side. Now, it's a two-handed process for me. I don't know why, but I do think that it's a little bit more intuitive than some other carriage locks, and you can actually see where it slots in to lock the machine, which is very nice. However, you have to get it right in that slot to actually lock it in place. And I do like carriage locks because they help secure your machine when you're trying to put it in a case and travel with your machine. There's also a touch control selector on the front. There's a little window on the front. It's got a little arm and you can move it around, and it's really cute. I like that it's not under the hood of the typewriter. I like that it's visual on the front, and it's just kind of interesting looking. I kind of like that design. Now, Remingtons do have weird ribbons. They just do. It doesn't make sense. I kind of hate that about them. Their ribbon contraptions make no sense to me. And this one does have smaller ribbon spools on it because there are these little caps that fit on top of them that make a really strange looking shape. And I do think overall it's just really interesting looking. I've never seen keys like this. I've never seen a finish like this, and I haven't seen many examples that look like mine out there in the typewriter database or in the collectors communities. So I do think it's interesting. But the best part of all of this is that it was really easy to fix, and that all of the typewriters in my collection are now fully functional. For now. I can't believe it was so easy to just take apart this machine, clean it, and then get it up to snuff and get it working again. But what I've learned is that sometimes the simplest thing is the hardest to see when you're working on a machine, and you have to learn something new with each typewriter along the way in order to kind of gain knowledge. So I learned from other typewriters how to take off casing, which made it possible for me to remove the casing on this machine, which I wouldn't have been able to do like 2 years ago. And looking for the pins on this machine or the carriage knob lever thingy things where I had to remove it with a pliers, I'm losing words. All of those processes were things that I learned on this job that I have never tried on other things. So each machine is something new, each repair is something new, and I'm so glad that this was easy, but it does make me kind of feel bad that it sat under a table for 2 years before I even got to it. I was just too intimidated by it. I didn't understand it. It looks different. If you're interested in more typewriter content, I do have some other videos on this YouTube channel. I also have an Instagram at just.my.typewriter. I want to thank you all so much for watching and remind you, you're just my typewriter.